And then you have Jose Hernandez, who started out in a family of migrant farm workers, got all the way to graduate school, went to work at the Livermore National Lab, worked on nuclear nonproliferation in Russia, one of the great success stories of the last 20 years. And for every woman here, played a major role in developing what is called full-field digital mammography, which is another way of saying there's a lot more women who survive breast cancer today because of what he did at our laboratory. And when Mr. Romney talks about how dependent we all are, all of us Democrats, we don't believe in self-reliance, he tried not once, not twice, but 12 times until he was finally accepted as an astronaut and went into space to the space station for us. That is a long way from a migrant family. We don't need any lectures on self-reliance. What we need is a roadmap to a brighter future, and these guys will give it to you. I want you to vote for all of them. They represent America. Now, you can't vote for all of them at once. You got to be in one of their districts, but you get the point. I mean, even though the other guys are trying hard to keep you at home, I want you to vote just once. Now, why do I say that? They represent the Democratic Party, and you do. Our future, our diversity, our focus on the future, our unwillingness to advance ourselves at the expense of others who, through no fault of their own, cannot defend themselves. And I want you to just think about this. This is what really matters. You know, sometimes I think the most popular line in my speech at the Democratic Convention in Charlotte was arithmetic. And I was rather stunned, but arithmetic does help clear things up. For example, in the last 50 years, since 1961, 52 years now, since January of 61, the Republicans had the White House 28 years, we had the White House 24 years. 66 million private sector jobs have been created. What's the job score? Democrats 42, Republicans 24. President Obama has faced roadblock after roadblock after roadblock in the last 2 years, but thanks in no small measure to the initiatives adopted in the first 2 years of his presidency, since the beginning of 2011, or 2010, and basically 2 years and 9 months, the private economy has produced 5.3 million jobs. That is twice as many as were produced in the 7 years of the Bush administration after the first little recession in 2001 and before the crash. We won't count the crash against him. Even if you don't, Obama wins 2-1. Why are we talking? Why are we talking about going back to what didn't work in a different package? And then there are those other, like, pesky numbers. When President Obama's opponent said, well, it's time for a new approach, and I was governor of Massachusetts, and we had a great education system. I thought, you know, I was governor of Arkansas, and we were the #1 rice producer in America, but I didn't have anything to do with it. I didn't have a lick to do with it. But what a governor's supposed to do is create jobs, right? He said that's what he's good at. So during that period of time, what does the arithmetic tell us? His state, with one of the finest technology bases in America rank 47th in job creation and 48th in new small business creation. Somehow that sort of escaped the ether because it was a fact. And then there's this little matter of the budget. How can you say I was for $5 trillion in tax cuts? Well, I said it for 2 years, but how can you say it? Because now I say I'm not. Now, let me be fair here. What he really said was, we're going to start by cutting everybody's taxes 20%, but don't worry, I'll make it up by repealing deductions. The problem is, everybody that knows anything about the arithmetic says, if your income is high enough, you can take all the deductions away and you still get a big tax cut. So we're going to dig the debt hole deeper before we start pulling our way out of it. That was obscured in that debate. But I'll just tell you something. You can say, oh, well, Clinton says one thing, the Republicans say another. How are we supposed to know? I'll tell you how you can know. There is only one campaign, President Obama's, that actually has published a budget on the internet. You can go and look at it. They have been making promises for 2 long years. In that whack-a-mole Republican primary deal they did. Promise after promise after promise after promise all the way through their convention. And you can't find their budget on the internet. President Obama's opponent won't put it up. Why? Because the numbers won't add up. They hadn't figured it out yet, so they just keep sort of kicking the can down the road and say, I'm different, I'm different, I'm different, I'm different. And then there was that terribly inconvenient moment, numbers again, when for the first time in virtually 4 years, the unemployment rate finally dropped below 8% to 7.8%. And honestly, I never saw such a bunch of long faces in my life. One of their great champions, Jack Welch, the former head of GE, says, oh, they obviously cooked the numbers. Then a bunch of others said, oh, they obviously cooked the numbers. Now, the interesting thing is, when the unemployment rate was above 8%, every month when it came out, the same Republicans said, this is right up there with the commandments Moses brought down from Sinai. This is enshrined in stone and perfectly accurate and shows how terrible, terrible, terrible our president is. But oh, when it dropped below 8%, all of a sudden, it's a colossal fraud. Now, I sympathize with the Republicans because they worked really hard on their #1 priority, which was to keep unemployment above 8% until the election. And it's disappointing when you work hard for 3 years and 8 or 9 months on something, and you get it there, almost get there to the finish line, and poof, turns out the American people are so good in these energy policies and the rescue of the automobile industry and all these other things are working so well, you just can't quite get it done. And in spite of your finest efforts, which include 700,000 teachers, police officers, firefighters, and nurses who lost their jobs because the president's energy jobs plan was not passed in the last year, in spite of all of it, it still went down below 8%. And it was, so, I understand why they're heartbroken, but it's good news for America, and it proves that a clean energy, modern economy, that a manufacturing economy with 500,000 new manufacturing jobs, 250,000 of them in the automobile industry, because of a restructuring plan which the Republican nominee opposed and opposes to this day. He said we should have let them go. It would have cost those 250,000 jobs plus 1 million more in the auto parts supply business, which explains why the auto companies that didn't get the help were for the legislation. because they know we're all in this together. It works a lot better than you're on your own. You need to support the President and these members of Congress. Now, I just want to mention a couple of other things. I asked him on the way up here, I said, so what are they saying about you on television? And he said, oh, they're repeating Governor Romney's claim that we robbed Medicare of $716 billion. He said it's all over the television. And they can do that because the Citizens United case hung a for sale sign on the seal of the United States of America. It was a disgrace. But there is the arithmetic. Here's what really happened, okay? Every so often, there's a group of doctors and other healthcare experts who review what we're paying for Medicare services, and they said this time, your inflation costs are way higher than they need to be because older people are doing a better job of prevention, and some of these programs like Medicare Advantage are working a little better than we thought, so you don't have to increase prices as much as you think.